Homophobia includes contempt and antipathy toward queer people. I've said many words critical of Netflix and the Duffer Brothers since the Stranger Things finale, including pointing out their queerbaiting of fans of Byler. Those of us who did see that the show was developing a romance between Will and his best friend Mike, where they inexcusably again this season gave Will hope that his love for Mike was returned, strung us along, and did not realize it in canon. But I'm not leaving Netflix and the Duffer Brothers any quarter. They're responsible for homophobia as well. I record this introduction after having shot the rest of this video focused on the Duffer Brothers to clarify my attitude towards them and towards Netflix, and to balance some of the points that I make. I do not put the Duffer Brothers in the same category as right-wing bigots and Trump supporters. I acknowledge that they're probably generally liberal and progressive in their political beliefs. I support their clear stance defending Will's coming out scene against the homophobic backlash against it. Because that scene, despite my sharp criticisms of it from a left-wing standpoint that I go over in this video, did piss off the homophobes. Here was a mainstream hit show and Netflix sympathetically portraying a gay main character as a hero, and boldly making a gay coming out scene part of the fight against evil. As much as some of us had problems with this scene, the right wing saw a giant middle finger aimed in their direction, and many typical average viewers saw it as a sincere attempt to make a pro-gay statement. Further, as part of my belief that the Duffer Brothers did once intend this show to be a statement for the marginalized, I believe in what I call Bylergate. The theory that the Duffers did once intend Byler to happen, but at some point in 2024, when they shot season 5, they pulled the plug, likely due to interference from Netflix. I plan a video on this later. We Bylers were correct to strongly believe that Byler was going to happen, because the preparation of it lived and breathed on our screens. And I don't believe the Duffer Brothers' current claims that they never intended Byler to happen, because the alternative is far less believable, that they were comic book evil villains who had a sadistic 10-year plan to hurt queer people. Remember that I pointed out in my videos that it wasn't even effective queerbait, at least before this season, because the clues were not overt enough to bait in large numbers of queer viewers. However, I do believe the Duffer Brothers sold out, pulled the plug on Byler, and are now acting as mouthpieces for Netflix. And their decision to ultimately queerbait means that their final product now promotes a set of condescending, liberal, homophobic messages to queer people that this video goes over. And so this video is right in being sharp against the Duffer Brothers. Also because their decision has set up LGBT people to receive homophobic harassment, and they're prioritizing their careers over principle. But I also should have made clearer in the video you will see that I should have also directed my ire against Netflix, which holds the purse strings and is responsible for everything the Duffers do. Conventional corporate wisdom says that Byler should not be allowed to happen in a mainstream global hit show like Stranger Things. There's something inherently radical and left-wing about a show that would compellingly portray a childhood best friends to lovers gay romance, one involving two closeted gay and/or bisexual teens. For the capitalists who own Netflix, a combination of financial concerns due to fear of right-wing backlash, potential interference by the Trump administration, and just a general instinct because they're capitalists to protect the status quo, all these things factored against Byler. Still, I believe we've never had a huge mainstream hit show like this feature a young gay man as a central protagonist and portray his gay self-acceptance and coming out as part of the fight against evil. This reflects the strength of our communities and how much we have already achieved. We have come so far since the 1980s and the AIDS crisis. But we are also right to be angry at the queerbaiting and the liberal homophobia I describe in this video. The problems I outline in this video are rooted in capitalism. The fact that a handful of capitalists decide what stories are told instead of the workers, the writers, the actors, the crew, who should actually be making these decisions. And it shows the importance of our continuing to fight to live our own lives, produce our own stories, and fight to change this unjust economic and political reality. If I were able to re-record this video, I would direct my rhetoric at not just the Duffer Brothers, but also Netflix. for they are jointly responsible for everything I criticize in this video. However, I 100% stand by the harsh words I say against the Duffer Brothers, because we have every right to be angry at them for what they signed on to and are now defending. Despite what they might tell themselves, and despite even probably being liberals and maybe progressives, they are defending a queerbait that hurt a lot of LGBT plus people. Their abandonment of Byler has resulted in a problematic mixed messaging to queer people that is condescending at best, but is fundamentally homophobic and discriminatory. And their actions have prompted homophobic bullying that they have yet to condemn. Now, on to the video. When Volume 1 ended and Will gained power over the hive mind that had tormented him through the power of gay self-acceptance, it seemed like the show was putting front and center a story of gay empowerment and promoting queer visibility and equality. But the show resulted in an ending so problematic that even Will's actor, Noah Schnapp, couldn't help but express that he had misgivings about what the Duffers were doing this season.
There was actually a scene in episode 8 that wasn't written. I was like, we didn't close this story well enough. And I told the Duffers, like, very terrified, because I was like, oh my God, I can't, I'm stepping out of my place. But I just like had to say something, and they did write in like a little scene to close a storyline. And then I started bringing it up again, and they're like, okay, no, shut up. Like it was one time.
This video, of course, is not critical of the Duffer Brothers for their decision to include gay characters in Will and Robin, which was positive and pretty standard for a modern show. It's about 3 things. First, they're queerbaiting. The show's unnecessary and cruel decision to, over the course of years, prepare the development of Byler, a romance between Will and his best friend Mike, fostering hope among its fans and a significant portion of the general audience until the very end. This was the single worst instance in media history of queerbaiting, the cynical marketing technique of hinting at but not depicting same-sex romance to attract, bait, queer and queer-friendly viewers, but never delivering on it in order not to alienate homophobic viewers. The Duffer Brothers' buildup of Byler was so real and so strong that some viewers thought that they actually got together in the end. Pause and look at these comments. There are also some people who described homophobic family members who were upset and mad that they did not get together. The relationship the show was building up between Mike and Will was so compelling that it was winning over some homophobes. According to Google Trends, interest in Byler skyrocketed with Season 5. Here is what it looks like, whereas Season 4 only had this bump. The finale was aired in theaters, and at some theaters, moviegoers had reactions like this one.
You're still here, and you still think we can be friends. Friends? Mm-hmm. No thanks. Mm-hmm. Best friends.
Bitch, I know you fucking right. I know you're fucking right. Whoa, what the fuck was that?
And there are many comments online reporting similar reactions, including this one saying, "My whole theater booed," and there was a bunch of people that screamed, "What?" Annoyed. Everyone wanted Byler. Of course, this wasn't the universal reaction across theaters. There were some hostile ones, but this is significant. That there was this much support that if they actually did make Byler endgame, they would have given even more development and built more viewer support for their relationship. For many general audience members, Volume 1 convinced them that Byler would become canon. This self-described casual viewer wrote in the Byler subreddit this post, titled, "As a former casual viewer up until Season 5, you guys aren't delusional." They write, "I watched this show the way I think most of the GA did, the general audience. On my phone half the time, not really paying much attention. I wasn't invested. Thought it was a pretty standard supernatural monster show with no real substance. To me, Mike was a very vapid character. I didn't understand his actions, and he just seemed to be kind of there, being both a bad friend and a bad boyfriend. Then Volume 1 changed everything. I complained to my partner that this show was terrible up until episode 4. But then the scenes happen where Will shoves Mike and the lighting changes, the flashback to young Mike and Will on the swing set, to Robin's voiceover about the snowball turning into an avalanche, the way the camera lingers on the look on Mike's face when Will taps into his power. I audibly said, "Oh." It suddenly felt crystal clear to both me and my partner, who presumed Mike to be straight up until then, that Will and Mike were being set up to be endgame. I rewatched the entire show with entirely new eyes. Suddenly, scenes that felt pointless on the first watch and the entirety of Mike's actions, personality, and arc made sense. Mike's monologue to Will in Season 2, when blue meets yellow in the West, pretty much all of Season 4, the ending of Season 3 where he looks weirded out after kissing Elle and asks Will if he won't join another party, it all clicked for me, and it added an entire new dimension to the show. This was a story about a closeted gay teen in the 80s, and the horror of that being exploited by a villain like Vecna preying on your deepest secrets and fears. The post goes on. I'll link to it in the video description where you can read it, and also the many comments to this post, including from other people who had the exact same realization moment. Demand for Byler spread to cast members and celebrities, as shown in this Tonight Show clip.
What I have is a yearbook superlatives board.
Ooh.
Okay? And then I want you to place the photo of who belongs in each superlative.
I'll start with the top one, the cutest couple that ever was. I'm tempted to do one of these two guys.
Who?
Well, he's...
Oh! All right, that's good.
Yeah. But wait.
I like this.
And then is this, I don't know, class clown?
Who?
Yeah. Finn.
No.
No?
Mike?
Spirited?
No.
Okay.
I think go back to couple.
Definitely not. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. They're the best couple. Yeah, that works.
Best couple. Thank goodness. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
By the way, this whole thing was a setup to bring up Byler, maybe with Jimmy Fallon's participation because he's a Byler. Because that's not a typical yearbook category, while all the other categories were. This video also goes after the show's homophobic humiliation of Will Byers. The show also supplanted the message of gay self-empowerment from Volume 1, with a conservative message of Will being a safe gay person who does not act on his gay feelings and merely seeks acceptance from others, as shown by the coming out scene. It humiliated him with a patronizing conservative message that gay people should move on from a supposedly straight love interest. A belief that, in this case, was unfounded and which applies a double standard on queer characters, telling them to not pursue their romantic interests, which is not what happens with straight characters in romance stories. It preached that Will's love for Mike, which was core to his character and is perhaps one of the purest, most selfless, painful, and heroic instances of love portrayed in fiction, was a psychological self-delusion and a source of shame. It was a message not of gay self-empowerment, but of gay self-denial. And this conservative message has armed all the bullies who are now currently going after the Byler fans who had believed the Duffers' claim that they had stood for the outcasts. Third, this video will detail how the show, in more ways than one, disregarded the validity of gay love. Will's love for Mike is tossed in the bin, and so is Mike's possible romantic love for Will. Even Robin and Vicky are not together in the epilogue, which was completely unnecessary. It would have been low risk for the show to have that, given that they're already an established couple and they don't threaten a straight relationship like Byler does. Instead, we get a more feminine Robin who doesn't once mention that she's dating girls, while Steve is boasting about his dating girls' life. We didn't even see her promised date at Enzo's with Vicky. That was promised more than once in the show, and instead we got a straight marriage proposal at Enzo's. We get a long-ass fairy tale happy ending, complete with romantic music, of them celebrating their decision to marry, a right denied to gay people in the 1980s and which is under attack today. Don't think I'm not bitter. The burying of queerness in the epilogue was so stark that the theory of conformity gate became mainstream and popular. The theory that the finale was a Vecna-created vision of conformity and that there was a secret 9th episode. Again, homophobia encompasses contempt and antipathy toward queer people. Queerbaiting inherently shows contempt. The Duffers made many queer people deeply invested in this story before pulling the rug out from under us. What's more, their queerbaiting, their conservative messaging, and their erasure of gay love has fomented a wave of homophobic bullying, mocking, ridicule, and abuse against Will's character and Byler fans online, sometimes going so far as to gleefully call on people to harm themselves or commit suicide. This is a serious issue. A 2024 study by the Trevor Project shows that 39% of LGBT+ people seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, and 12% actually did attempt to do so. The Duffer Brothers are now trying to gaslight the Byler fandom. They're trying to claim that there was never anything to look for, giving more fuel to the homophobic bullying that's happening. In a January 2nd interview, they claimed to Collider that they knew Byler was not going to happen 10 years ago when they started writing the show. Admitted that they were aware of Byler fans all these years, and yet they never addressed the widespread and growing hope and optimism that Byler would be canon. They offensively called the largely queer and young fandom noise that they needed to block out. I have my own opinion of whether their claim that they never planned Byler is true. Still, what's clear is that they're trying to gaslight Bylers for closely and fairly reading their own show. And they're doing this when we live in a dangerous and increasingly polarized political climate. This is a flyer by my civil rights organization, BAM. We live in a time where the murder of a queer activist woman is backed by a fascist president and a fascist movement that's behind him. The Duffer Brothers, who claim to support the discriminated against and marginalized, must change course and stop emboldening the homophobes and the bigots. They must stop gaslighting and trying to marginalize the queer people who had taken their storytelling at good faith, and condemn the homophobia that they have fomented. That was my long introduction. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ronald Cruz. I'm an organizer with the civil rights group BAM by any means necessary. I make videos analyzing entertainment I'm passionate about. Like and subscribe. I plan a couple more videos on Stranger Things, and you can also follow this gay lawyer's reactions and ruminations on entertainment. I'm reacting to heated rivalry now, and I'm consulting my Patreon supporters on what media I should react to next. And support my Patreon if you want early access to most of my videos and exclusive content. This will be another long video, so here's an outline of my video together with timestamps if you want to jump around. First, this was the worst, most elaborate, and cruelest queerbait of all time. Next, how homophobic bullying was prompted and fueled by the Duffer Brothers. Then, the homophobic exploitation of Noah Schnapp, Will's actor. And finally, the homophobic messages in the show's narrative. I'll begin by saying that there is a particularly cruel form of bullying that's employed against girls who are not conventionally attractive, where a boy, often under a dare or under pressure from his friends, asks a girl out, raises her hopes, and rejects her. The point is to humiliate the girl who had already lowered her expectations for herself, then raise them, only to cruelly confirm them publicly. You can see where this is going. The Duffer Brothers took queer people who had already lowered our expectations for ourselves in terms of finding representation in media or finding love in our own lives, raised our hopes with telltale signs and storytelling techniques that showed that Mike returned Will's love, giving many people, including many people who left heartfelt comments in my comment sections, hope that if Byler became real, they could find love themselves or find the courage to come out to their close family and friends. And giving hope to older people like me that this story might help fill the hole in our hearts for the love we were denied in our own lives. Only for the Duffers to take it back with a, haha, you were delusional. It feels like a massive prank, but calling it a prank understates how evil it was. The difference between what those bullies did and what the Duffers here do was that this was on a global scale, was far more elaborate, and it lined their pocketbooks in the bargain. This was indisputably the worst, most elaborate, and cruelest queerbait of all time. Note that I still believe in Bylergate, but these points are equally valid if the Duffers initially planned Byler but then sold out. They still strung us along until the very end, and the effect is a decade-long queerbait. And their current public statements make them look even worse, that they maliciously planned this queerbait for 10 years. To provide full context about how cruel this was, let's remember that this show made its main gay character suffer every season. He gets abducted and chased in the Upside Down. He gets SA'd when a tentacle forces itself down his throat and makes him an incubator for baby demogorgons. His mental autonomy and physical autonomy are violated. He gets possessed. He's made to feel he's being burned alive. He's forced to participate in causing the deaths of others. He watches his closest friends enter adolescence and move on to normal lives while he suffers alone, burdened by his connection to the Upside Down and being gay. His own romantic love for his best friend is used to repair that friend's romantic relationship with his own adoptive sister. And on top of all of this, he spent 3 seasons, at least, arguably 5, building up his love for his best friend. We'll see later that the Duffers applied their own experience being disappointed that their, quote, crush, unquote, didn't like them back to Will. I'll speak then on how wrong and offensive it is to equate Will's specific experience, the gay experience, to their crushes in high school. But for now, if you had wanted to create a positive moving on arc for Will, then you would have done what you did for the straight characters in your own show. With Dustin, you gave him a crush on Max that wasn't that deep and gave him the experience of being disappointed in the same season, so that he could move on and find romance. You did the same with Steve in regards to Robin, and he has an active dating life. For the straight main characters, you gave them a clear rejection and a sign to move on and let them pursue romance during the show's runtime. But for the gay main character, no. Instead, you had him fall for his best friend of all people, Mike, and built it up for years. Back as early as 2019 in Season 3, you could have had, after the rain fight, Mike understand Will's feelings and made clear that they could still be close friends. In Season 4, you absolutely should have had Mike clock Will's veiled and easy-to-spot love confession and have that same conversation. Then Season 5 would have been devoted to a landmark portrayal of a gay guy and a straight guy who are best friends, where one of them had romantic feelings for the other. A treatment the show had for Steve and Robin when a straight guy's feelings were unrequited. That would have been an empowering moving on arc for Will, but that's not what you did. Instead, you poured fuel on the flame and portrayed Mike having an intensity of feeling and a connection and compatibility with Will that he'd never had with Elle for 5 seasons. Signs that, had Will been a girl, would have been completely obvious to everybody. Everyone would be saying, when are they going to get together already? But they were signs that were not seen by many, including by this gay guy, due to the power of heteronormativity, which affects all of us. But for people who were observant and had media literacy, it was completely clear. You gave Mike and Will a lifelong romantic-coded bond that exceeded in time and depth any other potentially romantic relationship in the show.
Mike was always super protective of Will, and Will always leaned on him. And you could never really tell if it was like something romantic or just like a really special friendship.
It was the best thing I've ever done.
Meanwhile, Mike couldn't tell his own girlfriend that he loves her.
You never say it.
I say it. I love him, you're being ridiculous.
And he never says it on his own when Will's not rubbing his back and calling him pet names.
Don't stop. Hey, remember that. You're the heart.
He doesn't even say it when Elle says I love you to him and she's about to die.
I love you.
For many of us who looked deeper and saw the signs, you made it clear that Will, this long-suffering gay boy who once had said,
I'm not gonna fall in love,
was being set up for a happy ending and finding love in Mike. You gave him an unnecessary and cruel second moving on arc. Didn't he move on at the end of Season 4? You already had your moving on arc. When Will gave his painting to Mike and gave credit to Elle, he already had concluded that Mike was his Tammy. But instead, you showed Will having hope again in Season 5, thinking that Mike might like him back. That when Robin pointed out signs to look for, Will did think of some things that Mike had done in the intervening 18 months. Because he did. Why would he think this when he had already decided to move on at the end of Season 4? Mike did something. Duffers, why the hell would you have a gay boy have a moving on arc twice? Either you were making Byler happen, or you were being unnecessarily cruel to Will and to the people who were hoping he would have a happy ending. And we know which one was true. And by dragging things out to the very end, you gave the one gay main character no time to pursue romance after moving on. Given what you did, isn't this way beyond portraying your high school disappointment and treating him like your gay bitch? Instead of giving an empowering moving on arc, you gave a not moving on arc that humiliated Will and queer people. Now, I'm focused on Will here, but you also gave hope to many people who saw themselves in Mike, many of whom themselves or a loved one had heartfelt responses like this one to my videos, who identified with a closeted person who could pass as straight and dated the opposite sex, sometimes even married, who shared their stories and hoped that Byler would give them the courage to come out, or in the case of this commenter's dad, at least heal some of the trauma in their lives, and you queerbaited them and harmed them as well. And on top of all of that, you employed the Cyrano trope. Named after Cyrano de Bergerac, an 1897 play where Cyrano, who thinks he has no chance with a woman he's in love with because of his physical appearance, provides the words to another person who wants to woo her, expressing his own love. In all these stories, Cyrano wins out in the end because they find out whose love was truer. Here, Will was Cyrano. You had Mike fall in love with Will's painting and Will's feeling, thinking that they belonged to Elle. You clearly set up that Mike needed to be needed. He felt unfulfilled and insecure in his relationship with Elle, who was becoming increasingly independent and might not need him anymore. And you literally had Will say, in a veiled confession,
Elle needs you, Mike, and she always will.
Yeah?
Stranger Things is the only case I know of where the Cyrano trope is used and does not result in Cyrano winning love. It works for straight people all the time, but not for your gay character, and you dropped it as if it never happened. Next, you even appear to have queerbaited your own actors. You told Mike's actor, Finn Wolfhard, that the painting lie would pay off.
How is he this clueless right now? Like with the Will scene, like in the car, I was like, what? How? I remember asking them for something. Why would he not know this? And they were like, don't worry, it'll pay off in the end. And so I trust them.
Noah, who was gay himself, appeared to believe that Byler was endgame because he couldn't contain his excitement about it in many public statements, including in this one when he was asked what was the future for Mike and Will.
They're a big hot topic over the internet.
You guys can't get me in trouble. I don't want to say it. Spoiler. Okay.
And, Duffer Brothers, you set up Byler more in Season 5. You avoided having Mike and Elle kiss. You had Robin give Will the classic signs you look for to see if they like you back conversation that's common in romantic stories. You had Will have hope again and actively flirt with Mike. You had Robin give a speech to Will that he took to heart to stop being so goddamn scared. That seemed to prompt him to shed his shame for being gay and find his power. Based on a speech from a girl who, despite the assumption everyone's straight and the fear that they won't like you back, was able to find a Vicky. You had Mike's belief that Will could be a sorcerer be key to Will's breakthrough. And in the key moment, it was the sight of Mike about to die that drove Will to act. You had Will's first flashback be his meeting with Mike. The Duffers are now on record claiming that Will was thinking about the fearlessness of his childhood, but that's not what that film showed. It was a moment when a young Will was lonely and scared and found strength in Mike. Mike was not Will's Tammy, someone who Will idealized and imagined he'd get love from. He was loved by Mike, and a Tammy wouldn't have helped Will kill 3 Demogorgons. You had wall-to-wall subtextual clues, the sexual innuendos.
Notices they're gone.
Dick.
What?
The rainbow symbolism, Ted busting open Mike's closet door. You adopted the Byler fandom's blue and yellow colors for Mike and Will's swings. In episode 5, you had Will approach Robin, asking her what steps she needed to take before she felt she could approach Vicky. So Will was thinking of doing the same for Mike. And Robin told Will the steps she took, including coming out to someone. You had Jonathan and Nancy break up after they realized that they were mainly bonded by trauma and were lying to each other. Which, if there's any couple that can be said about in this show, it's Mike and Elle. You declared that you valued authenticity in relationships, while making clear that Mike and Elle's relationship was based on lies and was patched together by the painting lie and Will's love for Mike. All these things are chronicled in my videos, where over the course of the show's run, I found 27 exhibits and also 12 storytelling tropes showing that Byler was being prepared. And according to the Duffer Brothers, you put all these things in the show knowing that Byler would eventually not be canon. To which I have to ask again, when you put in all these details, were you laughing at the queer people you were giving hope to and who you were opening up to unfair ridicule? And you called the Byler fandom noise to block out. Doesn't this show contempt and antipathy toward queer people and is homophobic? Then you took all of these plot lines and narrative setups and abandoned them. You erased Will's love. You had Will go from hoping to be with the love of his life and building up the courage to confess his feelings, only to abruptly conclude that Mike was his Tammy and to be over him in 24 hours? You didn't even give Will the respect of a rejection. You claimed that you valued authenticity and friends don't lie. And you'd set up that Will was getting more courageous this season, standing up to his mom and accepting his gay identity and sorcerer. And yet you never had him find out whether Mike had any interest in him. Instead, you had Will deny himself the possibility of love and echo society's heteronormative view that simply because someone dates the opposite sex, they must be straight. And of course, you left the Cyrano trope with the painting lie, that narrative Chekhov's gun, completely unresolved, which you should never do as a writer, despite the promise you made to the audience and even to your own actors. You even originally intended that Will saying Mike was his Tammy was their last word between each other on this. These two best friends whose relationship had been core to the show since the first 2 seasons. Noah had to fight with you to have another scene to give some actual resolution, which ended up being half-assed as we saw, for his love for Mike, which you, the writers, had written in to be central to his character for the last 2 seasons. That he had been portraying and being gay himself identified with. And you reluctantly gave a scene that ended up rubbing salt in the wound.
Friends? No thanks. Best friends. Go to Planet Decatria.
It wasn't authentic. They didn't even hug. I've said for months now that if Byler didn't happen, that this would be the worst, most elaborate, and cruelest queerbait of all time. And I've seen no serious challenge to this claim. And part of why this is the worst case of queerbaiting is that, unlike some other shows, you never dismiss the possibility of Byler until after the show's run. Unlike the creators of other shows like Supernatural and Sherlock, who did dismiss the possibility with their fans. And your show genuinely seemed to be building up Byler, treating Mike and Will seriously, and never making their romantic coded relationship the butt of a joke. And it's the one instance of queerbait, I believe, where you made it half canon, where one is canonically gay and in love with the other. It seems so authentic and real that many people saw themselves in Mike and Will. In no other instance did you get people so invested emotionally, and you strung them along until the very end. I await the day when the Queerbaiter brothers are the first people you see when you look up queerbaiting on Wikipedia. Because this had everything you could possibly do wrong. Next is the homophobic bullying prompted by and fueled by the Duffer Brothers. Unsurprisingly, their queerbaiting prompted a wave of homophobic bullying and ridicule of Byler fans for following the narrative that the Duffer Brothers laid out. There's been open mockery that's blatantly homophobic, and generally just overall disrespect, and therefore homophobia, toward queer people who, unlike straight people, don't have a world of representation in media and have to struggle in our lives to be who we are. And the comments are also just plain stupid, ignoring the reality that there are people who are closeted or bisexual. And here are some comments from Byler fans who reported being bullied. This person writes, I posted a video on TikTok before the finale saying nothing but I hope Byler becomes canon, and I still get dozens of comments daily either laughing at me, saying it's not queerbait, I didn't mention queerbait, or calling me a slur over it. I stopped checking my notifications over it, but based on the amount I'm willing to bet there's at least one death threat. I blame the Duffers for this. Someone else writes, what sucks even more is I've seen Will become the butt of so many jokes now that Byler is officially bones. Everybody that laughed at us and berated us are now justified in doing so, and instead of Byler being an empowering couple at the end of a huge series, we get people openly being homophobic toward Will, making fun of him. It's horrendous and extremely irresponsibly handled. Yes. And this person writes, I hate how they keep glorifying it as a show about outcasts for outcasts, but the only thing it did for people like me, who are queer, is to be more hated by the people. Now the homophobia just intensified. the internet calling us more with slurs and curses. And this homophobic bullying was prompted by the show itself. First, by how the show itself humiliated Will and Byler fans. The entire arc of Will unsuccessfully hoping that Mike likes him back in season 5, when for an entire section of the audience the show seemed to have settled once and for all that Mike loved Elle, which made him straight, of course, because that's what heteronormativity does to you. In hindsight, because Byler never happened, just makes it look like Will regressed from where he was at the end of season 4 and not getting over Mike. I've been angry looking at reactors reacting to the field scene in Sorcerer, where the reactors laugh at him and yell at him to move on. Meanwhile, Mike had shown signs to Will that he was romantically interested in him. Will thought something in the hospital when Robin described what signs to look for. But the show showed none of these moments, making Will look like a fool, and by extension, Byler's. Then the show had the audacity to have that radio tower scene between Mike and Will in the finale, where when Will asked if they could still be friends, Mike said, "No thanks." And there was this brief moment of hope for Will, and many Byler fans gasped at this point. Then Mike said, "Best friends." What a cruel twisting of the knife. I've seen homophobes online saying that they burst out laughing at this point, mocking Will and Byler fans. Even fans of the competing ship of Malevolent, Mike and Elle, saw how wrong this was. And the Duffer Brothers put this in. Fueling all of this bullying was the show's decision to make Will a chronic, undeserving victim throughout all of the seasons, while not giving him a happy ending. The Duffers had their one gay main character go through hell every season. They set up Will's main arc to be his belief that he was never going to fall in love. The fear of so many gay kids, only to confirm this with regard to the love of his life during the show's span. And they had his love be the device to repair the object of his affection's relationship with the girl. The gay main character is the only one who doesn't pursue and find love during the main events of the show. He doesn't even get a kiss with his epilogue date, who, moreover, is just a date, not even a boyfriend. There's a Tumblr post that made the rounds shortly after season 4 dropped by Shandy and Champagne, where they write, "Forget all the other proof. We're either right about Byler, or they decided to write a show about a gay kid getting abused, bullied, kidnapped, hunted, starved, traumatized, possessed, burned, betrayed, abandoned, sidelined, ignored, and then rejected by the love of his life." If you look at the end of the show, nearly every character found love at some point. Joyce and Hopper, Mike and Elle, Lucas and Max, Dustin and Susie, complete with a musical number. Dustin and Steve even found a permanent bromance. Steve has numerous dating opportunities. Jonathan and Nancy break up, however, they were together for years, and also after the breakup grew closer. But for the queer characters, Robin, whose relationship with Vicky was largely developed off-screen and then forgotten in the epilogue, and Will, they end the series alone. Even Will's friendship with his best friend is sidelined, which I'll get to later. This show, which co-creator Sean Levy claimed was an anthem for the marginalized and imperfect, reinforced the message that gay people do not deserve and will not get the same happy endings that straight characters do in fiction all the time. Usually, in fictional stories, when you set up a character like Will, who's subject to undeserved suffering and yet still remains sweet, selfless, kind, loving, self-effacing, and sacrificial as Will is. Remember in season 2, he told people to close the gate even though he knew it would kill him. When such a character is set up, the audience wants and expects that person to get a karmic happy ending. For a moment, at the end of Volume 1, even the homophobes were drowned out by the chorus of people cheering him on. Here was the show's first victim finally standing up for himself, taking his power back, and claiming the happiness he deserves. There are countless stories where straight heroes who were once victims stand up for themselves and get happy endings. But the Duffers don't think that the gay boy should be included in these stories. Instead of telling a story affirming that Will deserves love precisely for the same qualities society looks down on him for, his homosexuality, his quiet courage, his love, where they could have revealed the painting lie that would have shown Mike Will's selflessness and made him realize who the perfect person for him was. Instead of making the show's ultimate statement siding with the outcast, the show humiliated Will, gave him false hope. set him up undeservedly to be a fool and a gay punching bag. Having gay representation is insufficient, duffers, when you make the queer people who identify with your gay character relive our trauma. And when you toy with our hopes, try to humiliate us. As I said, the duffers made him their gay bitch, opening the way for the current wave of bullying. And the Duffer Brothers have done nothing to discourage the bullying. In fact, they made a public statement making it worse, trying to gaslight Byler fans, and endorsing the homophobes' claims that Will and Byler fans were supposedly delusional. This is what the January 2nd interview with Collider says. In an exclusive interview with Collider's Steve Weintraub, Stranger Things creators Matt and Ross Duffer were asked directly how aware the creative team was of the Byler fandom, and whether they ever felt pressure to explicitly shut it down so it wouldn't distract from the show's larger story. For us, there's always noise, Matt Duffer said. But when we sit down to write a season, the goal is, you have to block it out, and you have to tell the story that you were always intending to tell. So you admit that you were aware of the Byler fandom, and yet you continue to do everything to develop Byler in the ways I summarized. You also ignore the question of why didn't you shut it down earlier when you clearly could have and should have. The creators of Wednesday told fans of Claire, the ship between Wednesday and her roommate, that it wouldn't happen a few days after season 2 dropped in August. And didn't you, Duffer Brothers, shut down speculation yourselves about Eddie coming back to life on October 20th? Also, when there was confusion, many fans thinking after Volume 2 that Jonathan and Nancy were still together, you said immediately in an interview released the day Volume 2 dropped that they actually had broken up. So why, when Volume 1 dropped, when many people read Robin's speech to Will as meaning that Will was gonna not be so goddamn scared and was gonna pursue his Vicky and Mike, why did you not clarify then that Mike was Will's Tammy? Why save your disrespect for the queer fandom? Another paragraph from the article. And that gets directly to the heart of it, because while Stranger Things ultimately made Will's sexuality explicit and central to the final season, and received its fair share of criticism for it from critics, a romance for Will and Mike was never on the cards for the Duffers. They stayed the course, making sure that Mike and Eleven were the actual endgame, but refusing to, quote, course correct based on fan pressure. The show avoided reshaping character motivations to satisfy discourse. Fans were making their theories based on what was in the show. As Duffer's comments make clear, the writers viewed the Byler conversation as external noise, not a storytelling mandate. So Duffer Brothers, you're claiming that you're acting on integrity, that you're trying to stay the course and not deviate from your plan all along to make Maleven endgame. Again, integrity would have meant being frank with Bylers and not milking us for money. And does the evidence show that you were preparing Maleven to be endgame? Leaving completely aside season 4 when Mike couldn't say he loved her, gaslighted her, and sided with her bullies, and gave a forced love confession based on Will's feelings, in season 5, Mike and Elle don't kiss, they have generally platonic interactions, and Elle is again lying to Mike, not sharing her plan to commit suicide, which she did share with Hopper and, of course, Kali. They had so little connection this season that many Byler fans openly speculated that they had broken up during the time skip. And many fans complained about how tepid their relationship was. Here's one post on the Maleven subreddit asking, why do you think Maleven just isn't giving this season? Here's a popular post on Threads saying, is it just me or was there no romantic chemistry between Mike and Elle this season, which got 3,800 likes? This post on the main Stranger Things subreddit, which got 25,000 upvotes, asked, is it just me, or did I feel like there was no chemistry between Eleven and Mike this last season compared to previous ones? So, Duffers, you didn't even adequately prepare the tragic endgame for Maleven that you started preparing in season 5, which would have been better served by a more authentic romance. The reason why is now clear. You didn't have Mike and Elle kiss, and you minimized the romantic chemistry in order to queerbait, in order to keep Byler fans' hopes up until the finale episode. The most damning part of this interview is the date of January 2nd, 2026. Instead of dispelling speculation about Byler once and for all during the show's run, you waited until right after the show ended. And you did it immediately to try to quiet speculation that you perhaps once intended Byler to happen and that there's missing footage waiting to be unearthed. Theories like Cutgate and Conformitygate, and the theory I'm promoting of Bylergate. The theory that Byler was always planned, but that the Duffers reversed course sometime late in 2024. Subject of an oncoming video, by the way. Like and subscribe. The Duffer Brothers' behavior is indefensible. The least that they could do, and they still can, is condemn the homophobic bullying that's happening online. Say that people should be allowed to cheer for ships that are canon and non-canon, and reaffirm the show's message of siding with the outcast and the marginalized. Particularly in these political times when a fascist president feels like he can get away with murdering a queer activist like Renee Good with impunity. It's terribly irresponsible for the Duffer Brothers, who claim to be progressive, to not do anything against the homophobic bullying that they prompted with their actions. I will soon go over the homophobic and condescending messages of the story that the Duffers told. But there's one more thing I need to cover. The Duffer Brothers' homophobic exploitation of Noah Schnapp. One of the biggest Byler fans to be queerbaited was Noah himself. Here's his tweet after Season 4, Volume 1, shipping Byler. You can totally see why, being gay himself and relating to Will. He has always been an enthusiastic Byler fan, liking fan content and being giddy, making public statements talking about it. And he's also been the cast member most outspoken in the last several weeks, expressing dissatisfaction with the Duffers and the show, which I think we can fairly assume have to do with their decisions about Will and Byler. Now, because I'm expressing political support for Noah here, I want to briefly address the controversy around his statements about Israel in late 2023, which I haven't done in video form before. I say what I'm about to say as an organizer and lawyer activist with the organization BAM. BAM stands for the Coalition to Defend Affirmative Action, Integration and Immigrant Rights, and Fight for Equality by Any Means Necessary. And here's footage of me at a protest against genocide Joe Biden. I speak as someone who wants victory for the Palestinian struggle, who wants Hamas to have a military victory to end the genocide, so that the people of Palestine can democratically form their own government and have an independent Palestinian state. This is the first page of BAM's general statement on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Link in the description. I therefore disagree with Noah's statements in late 2023 to the extent that they defended or justified the Israeli government's actions, including war crimes and genocide that it was already committing. I also oppose the show's homophobic exploitation of him, support any efforts he makes to call it out, and also oppose bigoted, including homophobic, attacks that are being made against him. And there isn't much point going after a celebrity in the grand scheme of things, given what our movement needs to do to actually win. For victory to the Palestinian struggle, we need mass collective action, as outlined in this other flyer from BAM. Things like dock worker strikes that have occurred around the globe to prevent arms from going to Israel. Things like that need to spread to the United States so that we can give material assistance to the Palestinian people on the ground against a genocide. In Italy, dock workers refused to ship arms to Israel and were the catalyst for a general strike. So, posting about a celebrity just strikes me as unserious internet arguing. Isn't what our movement does in the streets far more important than what some celebrity thinks? Oh, by the way, subscribe to my new channel, The BAM Report, link in the description. Now back to the show's treatment of Noah. First, they queerbaited Noah himself. It's established that the Duffers like to hide big plot points from their own actors, such as the reveal that Will would gain powers that much of the cast learned during the table read for Sorcerer. And also during that same table read, it was clear that cast members sensed romantic possibility and gay subtext with Mike and Will.
Your powers don't come if they're innate. As far as crazy theories go, I've had crazy. And with 11 in the upside down...
Water spits out of the sink pipe right into Mike's face. Mike and Will are both frantically working together to repair the leak.
So none of the actors were clear that Byler would ultimately not happen. My main theory is what I call Bylergate. The theory that the reason for the show's extensive preparation for Byler is the most straightforward one. That the Duffer Brothers actually intended Byler to happen, and Noah did as well, but for whatever reason, they pulled the plug on it. The Duffer Brothers reversed course late in 2024, and this became apparent to the cast only with the final scripts, which a recent documentary shows they were still working on the finale script while shooting the finale. This sudden turn would at least partially explain the stark difference in quality noted by much of the fandom between Volume 1 and Volume 2, as if some plot lines were dropped and scenes were cut. In early 2025, Noah made a statement strongly hinting that he spent most of his time shooting scenes with Finn Wolfhard this season, suggesting that there were Byler scenes that were cut.
I wanted to ask you what your favorite moments with Finn on set were.
Well, I would probably say from this new season.
Yeah.
So I guess I can't tell you. But other seasons? What I've realized actually is that me and Finn, I think I spent the most time with Finn throughout the course of sorry, I gotta not make sure it's the same thing for season 5, but in other seasons, what was the question?
What was the...
I think the Duffers genuinely once intended Byler because the alternative is harder to believe. Their own account in the Collider interview means we'd have to accept that they are cartoon villains, developing Byler for a decade knowing that they would betray queer people in the end. I'm not saying that's impossible with these two individuals, but sabotaging consistency within their own story, such as setting up the Cyrano trope only for it to not pay off, for instance, seems like too big a hit to their credibility, reputation, and future career prospects to justify executing a vindictive 10-year plan against queer people. Bylergate would explain why Noah couldn't contain his excitement trying not to spoil Byler Endgame in 2024. And there are many other instances documented in my Byler videos showing that other cast members were excited for Byler too. Regardless of when exactly the Duffer Brothers decided to queerbait, they at some point continued to string their own actors along, first and foremost Noah himself. And I know of no other instance of queerbaiting where the showrunners queerbaited their own cast and crew. After shooting wrapped for season 5 at the end of 2024, Noah must have finally known that Byler was not going to be canon. And yet the Duffers apparently invoked their contract with Noah and forced him to be silent like they were in not dispelling the possibility of Byler for an entire year. As a gay man himself, and given my sense of him, it's hard to see him willingly and wanting to queerbait the community. And he was probably at least as devastated about the queerbait as we were, if not several times more. This is him in October 2025, about 1 month before Volume 1 dropped, when asked whether Byler would be happening this season.
Beloved, stay together in the final season. I cannot speak on that either. So don't shoot the messenger. But there will be. You guys will be satisfied, and I can't say how.
The Duffer Brothers forced Noah, a gay man, to participate in their exploitation of the queer community. During the month of promo interviews, Noah was decidedly muted and different from his usual giddy, gleeful personality. And he has made statements the past few weeks that hint that he was not fully happy with the Duffer Brothers' decisions and his experience on Stranger Things. Mind you, as I play these clips, that he's under an NDA, and so not only can he not disclose certain things, but he's almost certainly barred from disparaging the show in any way. So he has to be careful about his words, which makes what he does say all the more significant. First is this interview where he reveals that the Duffer Brothers didn't plan to have any closure for Mike and Will after Will's coming out scene, and that Noah had to fight for a scene to happen.
You probably know your character better than most people. So I'm curious if there's anything about their final arc, their final moments that came from you, completely from you, that was your idea or something that you were like, I think this is how this should go.
There was actually a scene in episode 8 that wasn't written that I was like, we didn't close this story well enough. And I told the Duffers, like, very terrified, because I was like, oh my God, I can't, I'm stepping out of my place, but I just like had to say something, and they did write in like a little scene to close a storyline. And then I started bringing it up again, and they're like, okay, no, shut up. Like it was one. It was one time.
What made Noah terrified? Either there was a general dismissive attitude towards cast input, or he had just learned that the Duffer Brothers were betraying Byler and knew that was very important to him, and he was afraid to confront them or have any discussion with them about Mike and Will. Of course, it could be a combination of both. And Noah's description of what we did get, a, quote, little scene, end quote, does not exactly show enthusiasm for it. And he apparently wasn't satisfied because he said he started to bring it up again. And he said they'd had enough. Might as well have told him that we've had enough of your gayness this season. It's outrageous that this young gay man felt terrified to approach the Duffers after they disrespected him and this gay character he respected and had embodied and identified with for years. By then, Noah must have started thinking what many of us are thinking, that he was deceived and that he was being used as a gay man to tell a story that allowed the Duffer Brothers to appear like they were for diversity, but didn't actually do Will and queer people justice. The problematic coming out scene was it. That was going to be the culmination, what they had planned for Will this season, which is ridiculous. Remember, many viewers did not realize that Mike understood that Will's crush on someone was on him, and the Duffer Brothers had to explain it afterwards. So they never planned to show how Mike reacted to this news or how Mike and Will would relate to each other going forward. Did they think the coming out scene was sufficient to check off the gay diversity box, that they wouldn't have to show respect to this gay character and his gay actor? If the Duffers were going to go with the best friends route, why not have Mike ask Will if he was Will's Tammy? First of all, understand who was Tammy. Why not sort things out? Why not have Mike learn that Will's love for him was lifelong and deep? Why did they have no emotional heart-to-heart? Why did they not even hug as best friends? Instead, we get this little scene and no overt interaction between these best friends for the rest of the entire 2-fucking-hour finale. Steve and Jonathan had more time and intimacy in the finale. It's not like this problem wasn't raised with the Duffers, Noah says so himself, but whatever more he wanted, the Duffers shut it down. And you want to know my honest opinion? They shut it down because they knew any interaction between these two in the finale would have had too much chemistry, would have recalled their long history, and they couldn't have that cast a shadow over the Mike and Elle scene. If Byler couldn't be defeated in this war between ships, it had to be erased, and like the painting lie, it had to be treated like it never existed. Next, there are signs that Noah had issues with the Duffer Brothers' writing, which would put him in line with much of the online fandom, which is slamming Season 5 as we speak. Noah wanted answers to questions concerning Will that many fans had. He tells USA Today in this December 29th article, I was like, guys, the show starts with him and then we just sidelined him after Season 3. Can we clear up why he was the first victim? And then he speaks of Volume 2 about things that are actually not on screen. He says, Volume 2 explores Will's internal stakes and gets more into answering questions about why this all exists. The parallels between Will and Vecna are a little like Harry Potter and Voldemort. The Duffer Brothers had promised that many questions would be answered this season. But one of the show's central mysteries, why was Will chosen? Why did Vecna in 1983 walk up to Will saying, at long last, we can begin? He had apparently eyed Will for a long time. These were never answered. Why the parallels between Will and Henry? Why was November 6th important? Absolutely, Noah was probably unhappy about this lack of answers in the final product. In this next interview, where he and Millie Bobby Brown, who plays Elle, field fan theories, listen to what Noah says.
The Will that's with them is actually a clone created by Vecna, and the real Will has been in the Upside Down the entire time.
Honestly,
I think you guys are better writers than me.
Not knowing more, one might think this was just a joke, but we do know more, and perhaps he here is low-key being candid. And people who know Noah and his personality know that he tends to be candid. Next is evidence that the Duffer Brothers have displayed problematic behavior towards Noah and other actors. For this next clip I'll play, it's a little longer, I'll just ask you to think about what kind of work environment existed on set and whether Noah has had conflict with the Duffer Brothers.
So I made sure before the season started, like, I'm going to map this out. And I mapped out like the kind of external stakes and that arc with the supernatural, and then his internal arc and that struggle, and made sure to kind of show up each day and know where I was somewhat. I mean, still struggle to understand it because our show is so confusing. But then I, no, sorry, it's incredibly,
Right here.
It's so impressive, but it's confusing.
Yes.
Good thing it's not a season 6, because we'd be writing you out.
Whoa.
Shots fired at the Stranger Things fan.
Oh, shit.
I'm teasing. We love you.
Love you too. So it was fun, kind of getting to work with the Duffs. Sometimes fun. Other times not.
What is going on here?
And then working on the internal was especially fulfilling for me.
Remember how Gaten like put the mic on the ground?
Okay, I'll finish.
Maybe that's a good move.
I was just gonna finish and say, like, with his internal struggle, it was especially fulfilling for me because it was obviously more close to home, and I got to access really surface level emotions that I got to work with on screen.
Well said.
There it is.
All right.
First off, it's improper for a boss to joke about firing anyone, and in this public context, it's an implied threat on everyone. Are they being prickly here because Noah crossed them and had reason to cross them? Now, it's all covered up in laughter, but you, of course, are expected to minimize differences in the public eye when you are working on something together. There seems to be some tension and discomfort between Noah and the Duffer Brothers. And this isn't the only indication of problematic behavior by the Duffer Brothers. There's several examples, but I'll only spend time focusing on one. When Max and Lucas in season 2 had their first kiss at the Snowball, the Duffer Brothers revealed this to their actors the day that they were going to shoot it.
I was shooting that.
You didn't.
Wait,
This is all
your fault, though.
Go on. It is not my
fault.
fault. No.
Take us to
It was not written in the script. I think it was you, Ross. You say, like, oh, Sadie, you ready for the kiss? I'm like, what? No, no, that's not in the script. That's not happening. And so the whole day I was, like, stressed out.
You reacted so strongly to this. I was just joking. You were so freaked out that I was like, well, I gotta make her do it now.
That's what happened. That's why it's my fault.
That's why I'm saying it's your fault. Anyways, it's great. I can't imagine without it. Thank you.
Well, yeah, you're welcome.
And we made you guys kiss a lot.
Yeah, how
It was
many
like-
takes was this?
It was 7?
No, it was
20.
No.
No.
We
Because
had
you
to do it,
didn't
like,
mumble,
10
I'm coming in,
times.
had to do
And then it starts getting closer, and I'm like, wow. Because it was my first kiss. So I'm like, this is feeling weird. And then I heard a big applause. Finn and Millie came back. Millie's face was all red, and Finn was like, we kissed. I'm like, what? It's like, you're next. And then, like, background was like, ooh.
Our first kiss was in front of, like, 200.
I love it.
Yeah. And their parents,
And everyone's
and
like-
the crew, and my mom.
There's no indication that they're aware of or frankly care about best practices when directing actors who have intimacy in their scenes, particularly younger actors. There was a controversy that flared up at the time. Here's a Teen Vogue article from 2017. And the Duffers' response to this controversy? They told Variety, "Give me a break," Matt added. They had to kiss 3 times. There's actually more times, as we just saw. You'd think it's the end of the world, but I guess it's a big deal. Such contempt. Caleb, I think it was his first kiss. It was definitely Sadie's first kiss, I know that. But then even Millie and Finn had never kissed before. It was still huge. Actually, though, neither of those kisses were written in the script, so we kind of dropped that on them the day of and caused a major panic, but they did it. He continued that it was fun to push the kids' buttons. Quote, "It was fun. I love it. You have to torture them a little bit. You know you've got to entertain yourself some way. And we have all these children who are just fun. I know exactly how to push their buttons at this point. Kids who are your employees, who depend on you for their livelihood, you cannot expect them to stand up for themselves when inappropriate behavior happens." So they're displaying a very common trait, shall we say, of men, particularly straight white men, of not listening and not learning. which was kind of on display in the making of season 5 documentary that just released as well. Next, the Duffer Brothers shifted responsibility for the poorly received coming out scene onto Noah. Many queer people criticized it as unrealistic, that he shouldn't have had to come out under duress from his abuser, Vecna. Noah himself remarked that it felt like a press conference.
Having the entire cast there standing watching like a press conference.
I'll say more about the problems of this scene later. Meanwhile, the homophobes went after it as well. In an interview with Variety, the Duffer Brothers explained what many of us already knew, that Will was preparing himself to take on Vecna and denying Vecna a weakness, which didn't address our community's concerns. Weren't the people Will was afraid of losing that Vecna could give him a nightmare about Joyce, Mike, and his close friends? Why include so many other people? In this quote, they're clearly not responding to the homophobic backlash, but to concerns from queer people. Matt says, quote, "I think that's where Ross and I were most sensitive, was Noah, because of how close to home this hit for him. And our goal was to make sure that he was comfortable and happy with the scene, and when he was, we felt good about it. I've been texting with him a lot, but texting with him specifically after that scene and after that episode aired, and he's in a really good place. He's very proud of the scene, and we're proud of the scene." So they're using Noah as cover to defend their writing decision, saying that he approved it. Now, from all accounts, Noah did approve the scene at the time. It's noteworthy to say that he initially thought that his coming out scene would have been an intimate scene with just Joyce. And he was totally right in expecting that. And what might be happening is that his later approval of the scene was constrained by the parameters the Duffers had already set as to where his character arc was going this season. But second, it wasn't fair to expect of Noah, a young queer man who had just come out 2 years before, who had little knowledge of what coming out was like in the 1980s, and who, remember, was their employee and was someone who was terrified to ask for more respect given to his character later. It wasn't fair to expect him to give informed and frank feedback on the scene. And if he has a different opinion now, or had a different opinion initially, he's forced by his contract not to voice it. The Duffers, in the face of criticism about their scene from queer people, should have dealt with the substance of the criticism, either accept it or rebut it. Instead, they use Noah's queerness to avoid accountability, and effectively shunt responsibility for a scene that was their responsibility onto a gay employee. The Duffers should not use Noah as a gay cover. And you gotta feel for Noah. He put a lot of work in that scene. It was, of course, extremely personal, it had to have been traumatizing, and he gave a great performance. But he's now the face of this scene, and the Duffer Brothers have unfairly assigned responsibility for this poorly received scene onto him, which, need I remind you, is a target of massive homophobic backlash. When the scene's flaws were the Duffers' responsibility and not his, the Duffers' conduct is gross and indefensible. Given his experience with the Duffer Brothers, we can now see why Noah made this statement to The Hollywood Reporter on November 25th, where he was asked, "You also came out publicly a few years ago, so would you like to do any projects that spotlight the LGBTQ community?" Absolutely. If the right project comes that I feel really resonates, then I will. I don't want to just do anything, because it's so personal to me. I've been a little more picky with those kinds of projects. I want it to really resonate and mean something, and not just be another one for whatever diversity points. But I'm absolutely open to that. Now, he doesn't name Stranger Things, but it's hard to think of another project where it could be fairly accused that he was asked to play a queer character in order to score diversity points. Hopefully Noah can afford to be more candid at some point, and that our continued outrage against the Duffer Brothers for their queerbaiting and their mistreatment of Will and Noah will create a situation where he can have more courage. And I can't help but point out how Noah's predicament parallels Will's, where he himself is forced to speak on behalf of the show, the hive mind, to harm his own community. Hopefully he can have his own sorcerer moment and show the Vecna brothers that he stands for his own world and not theirs. But also, since he's a working actor in Hollywood, we shouldn't be surprised if he doesn't. We'll have to be the ones who continue to voice outrage and not be silent, which we can. And now onto the homophobic messages in the Duffer Brothers narrative. First, they dismissed Will's love for Mike as a mere one-sided, quote, crush. Remember that homophobia includes contempt for gay people and gay love. After the series finale, someone left this comment on one of my videos, and it really rings true. They write, "What hurt me the most is that they treated Will's love as something not worth confessing and getting rejected. They treated it as a mere hallway crush, not even a proper crush." The Duffers told the LA Times in this Christmas Day article, when Volume 2 dropped, quote, this is from Ross, "It's more of an important message to put out to younger viewers. When I'm thinking about my younger self and our struggle growing up, to put out a message that it'll all be right if the secret crush you have works out, versus you don't need that. Even if it disappoints some people, it's the more important message to put out into the world. Matt, not one crush of mine worked out. It hurts you though, right? If you feel feelings and it's unrequited, it feels like an attack on you or makes you feel unwanted." First off, the show never, not once, made clear that Will's feelings for Mike were unrequited. Their casual dismissal that Mike might love him back ignores the reality of the many Mikes out there, many of whom shared heartfelt comments in my comments sections, but dated someone of the opposite sex while actually being in love with someone of their own gender. And I have to tell you that at the very end of this video, I'm going to play an amazing TikTok video of someone sharing their own Mike story. Will's feelings were far more than a crush, Duffers. When Will comes out, he suggests that Mike was just as Tammy, referring to Robin's one-sided crush on Tammy Thompson. But Mike is no fucking Tammy. Did Tammy ask Robin if they could be friends at age 5? Were they inseparable and played games and did everything together for 10 years? Did Robin get kidnapped and taken to another dimension? And did Tammy argue and fight with people to save her life when everyone else gave up on her? Did Tammy put her arm around Robin's shoulder? Did she hold her hand when she was tormented and possessed? Did she sleep by her side to make sure she was okay? Did she confess that being Robin's friend was the best thing she's ever done? Was Tammy the only person Robin felt like she could be herself with? The one person who made Robin not feel like a mistake? Was Will not sincere in his veiled love confession when he said that he needs Mike and he always will? And Will's love for Mike was so complete and so selfless that he gave the painting that he had worked painstakingly on and gave credit to Elle so that Mike could find happiness with Elle, prioritizing Mike's happiness and right to love above his own. Yet the Duffers have the gall of equating Will's full, complete, mature, selfless love for Mike to their crushes in high school that Matt said, "Not one crush of mine worked out." Be for fucking real. How disrespectful to gay love. If Will were a girl, they wouldn't have dismissed her feelings for Mike as a mere crush that she should just move on from. But there's a third thing wrong with your statement, Duffers. You can't equate a straight person's experience of unreturned crushes to a gay person's experience. When you're straight and your crushes don't like you back, you might agonize over why that's happened. Maybe you're not conventionally attractive, maybe you're not a nerd, maybe there's some other factor. But for queer people, it's the agony of never knowing. Our problem is the opposite. You don't even try to find out whether they like you back, because it exposes you to too much danger, to being outed, to social ostracism, to being disowned by your family, to violence. Some people who go for it get rejected because the other person fears being outed. Due to all these fears, you don't even try. And you live the rest of your life with anguish and regret about what could have been. And, I can attest to this, you feel like a part of your childhood was stolen from you. You never got the chance to experiment with dating and crushes while young that straight people do. At the end of my first Byler video, I ended with a testimony of a gay man who was in love with his best friend for years, and it was mutual. But they only realized it when the friend was about to die, and they confessed their love to each other. There are countless stories out there, some of them in my own comment sections, of people who held back their love for a same-sex friend for years because of homophobia. And the time comes for me to share my own story, which shows how deep the fear and self-denial can get. In middle school, you can say I was in love with the same boy for 3 whole years. I think I thought about this person every night going to sleep. We were kind of yin and yang in terms of personalities, and we were in different classes, but we did have some shared interests. We did a few friend things, but he also kind of lightly bullied me at times and made jokes at my expense in front of others. Well, what do you know, but he writes the following in my yearbook. Ronald, will you marry me? Just kidding. You've been a great friend. I'm sorry for picking on you all the time. You deserve to win the spelling bee. Have fun this summer and don't break too many hearts, the lady killer you are. Wish you the best of luck at Lowell, your next school. I'll come visit you. And you can also do my homework, just kidding. It's been fun knowing ya. Hope I see you real soon. Your admirer. And then his name. P.S. Call me, we'll talk. And he left his phone number. And you know what I did? I never called him back. I was too goddamn scared. And it might sound crazy. It does sound crazy, and I don't fully know why I didn't. I pretty much knew I was gay already. I think I believed he was straight, though the note suggests otherwise. But yeah, I didn't call him. Now, to stave off anyone trying to hook me up with this person, I did reach the person again in adulthood, and I told him my feelings for him, and he clarified that he's not gay. But who knows what might have been while he was young and still figuring things out. I might have had a chance for young love that I didn't. So Duffer Brothers, your message to queer people is to not pursue our crush. Thanks a lot, straight man. I didn't think of that. We're already fucking doing that, even when our feelings might be returned, and that's the problem. We already thought we had no chance with a probably straight guy, when in fact, many queer people date the opposite sex or don't present stereotypically as queer. And you have Will just assume Mike's straight when Mike never clearly rejected Will, and you endorse that? By doing so, you just reinforce the message we're already telling ourselves.
I'm not gonna fall in love.
That we should expect less. That we don't have the same right to find love that straight people feel like they have all the time. And your message is echoed by many homophobes online who berate and mock Will for merely thinking that Mike likes him back. You're reinforcing the shame that homophobes already impose on us for wanting love. Queer people don't pursue romantic opportunities even when there are clear signs they like you back because there's so much to fear. And that's why it's utterly cruel for these straight writers to portray Mike the way they did, who clearly feels more than just friendship to Will, and to bait us. Gaslighting and re-traumatizing queer people and reinforcing the fears and self-doubt we already feel. Saying that when we saw this guy, Mike, say,
You know, Max and Lucas and Dustin, they're great. It's Hawkins. It's not the same without you. I think it'll be easier if we're a team, friends. Best friends.
Saying that when we thought he might like Will romantically, that we were delusional? No, you're building up the heteronormative delusion that everyone who dates the opposite sex is straight and harming the queer people you claim to be helping. If you had wanted to send a message that queer people should move on from an unrequited love, then you would have given Will a clear rejection and not created so much ambiguity about Mike's feelings. By queerbaiting, you're sowing self-doubt and encouraging more queer people to stay in the closet. And the thing is, you already showed a realistic, sensitive portrayal of a gay boy dealing with the pain of moving on from his love for his best friend with Will at the end of season 4. You then could have used a time skip in the first episodes of season 5 to have Mike learn about Will's feelings and for them to find a way to still have a close platonic friendship. That would have been a moving on story that was empowering to queer people and shown that they could still be authentic and still maintain friendships with the people they love. But instead, you did the opposite. You made Will and the audience again have hope by continuing to develop Byler, only to yank it without explanation in the final episodes. You made Will look foolish in hindsight, a gay punching bag for the homophobes. And you had Will himself echo your condescending lesson that his love for Mike was bad. The show's ultimate message for Will wasn't gay empowerment, it was gay self-denial. The season had a great start with Volume 1. Will was asserting himself, growing more confident. He found an older gay mentor in Robin, and when Robin talked about the romantic signs to look for, Will clearly thought about signals sent by Mike. Remember, this is the boy who in Season 3 said,
I'm not gonna fall in love.
When he gained his powers in Sorcerer, the flashbacks made clear that that was tied to his accepting himself, that included being gay and his love for Mike. The show seemed to be recognizing the truth, that loving himself was not separate from loving other people, and if we're talking about accepting your gay self, absolutely. They were all tied together. They are who Will is. They are the same thing. And as I've said in my videos, being gay is not just hugging yourself, but also acting on your gay feelings. Will then asks Robin, what did it take for her to find the courage to approach a Vicky, who we all remember had dated a boy and was supposedly straight. Everything was being set up for Will to actually find out whether Mike liked him back. Casual watchers were expecting this. It was the clear setup. And for people who remember the painting lie, the answer was probably going to be yes. It's strange, the show portrayed Will brimming with hope and portrayed sympathetically his thinking about approaching Mike. But the Duffer Brothers suddenly reversed course and preached that this was wrong, and had Will realize that he was wrong. This was the setup for the coming out scene. Will confides to his mom that Vecna targeted him because he was weak.
That's why, out of everyone in Hawkins, he chose me. Because he knew I was weak and he knew he could control me. He sees my secrets.
So he comes out to the group of people to deny Vecna a weak point. We are told by Will during the coming out scene that he was already over his crush on Mike. Aside from the fact that that was not yet established, the Duffer Brothers made clear that they thought this was a weakness that he had shed. And this makes me mad. There was nothing wrong or shameful about his love for Mike. In fact, it was beautiful and brave and heroic. And I think about people online who mock and ridicule Will for loving Mike as making him supposedly weak, a simp for Mike. First off, that's just homophobic. Second, Will's not an idiot. There were signs that Mike liked Will back that he thought about in the hospital scene that the show decided not to show the general audience. But third, it takes a fuck of a lot more strength and courage for a gay person to love than for a straight person, because of the dangers and consequences that straight people never have to deal with. These bigots could use a lesson from us about strength and courage. So Duffers, don't preach to us that our love is weak. But oh no, wouldn't Will be rejected? Let him fucking find out. It's expected in straight stories to seek out love and maybe learn how to deal with rejection. The Will we saw at the end of Sorcerer was no wallflower. He knew he was a beautiful person deserving of love. And if Mike don't swing that way, at least he tried. His loss, not mine. Why Robin's speech was so inspiring to queer people around the world was because she said we should stop being so goddamn scared and fly. And the Duffers are here telling us not to even spread our wings. Instead, they psychologize Will's love for Mike. Psychologize means to make psychological investigations or speculations, especially those that are naive or uninformed. They reduce Will's love for Mike as just a crush, as a gay self-delusion that's the byproduct of not loving himself.
I mean, it was never about him. It was about me.
They fucking played film footage of them meeting as kids. How dare you psychologize this? They then deny Will a clear rejection and just have him assume that Mike is straight because Mike walked away from him in the field? Wasn't this cheap And didn't the script itself say that Mike didn't recognize that Will was flirting with him?
It's a small moment, but makes Will red with embarrassment. He feels stupid. Mike doesn't clock it, Robin does.
Yet the Duffers say that the healthy thing for Will to do was to recognize that his love for Mike was a delusion and to not act on his gay feelings, to deny them. This in a show that extols the importance of emotional honesty for building strong relationships, which happens with Lucas and Max, Jonathan and Nancy. Straight people get to express their feelings in this show, but gay people, our feelings, stay in the closet. The Duffers didn't even plan to have any Mike and Will resolution scene. Noah had to demand it, because Will's love was a result of psychosis, apparently. And the one scene that they reluctantly wrote had Will blandly smiling, seemingly over it, and didn't acknowledge the depth of Will's love for Mike, because it was just a hallway crush, you see. They had Will do what so many of us queer folk already do. He gave up on his chance at love without even trying to get it, and the Duffers preached that it was right. Next, the coming out scene tried to present a safe gay person, which is why it failed. Will went from accepting and asserting who he is in Sorcerer to pleading for acceptance from others. And this is not how coming out usually happens. It happens after we already built up the courage to deal with a bad reaction. So by the time we do say, I'm gay, we're putting people on the spot to accept that. We are not pleading. We might get emotional like I was, but fundamentally we are asserting. It would have made more sense for Will to come out just to his mom and maybe Jonathan, Mike, and the rest of the core four. Those are the people Will is afraid of losing after all, if we're talking about denying a weak point to Vecna. But the Duffers wrote it so that he comes out to a whole room of people before he seems ready. It turns what could have been an authentic scene to like an after-school special. As if he's addressing not just the people in the room, but also the viewing audience. He belabors how I'm just like you to his friends, which is problematic, because what if Will liked Madonna or other typical 1980s gay things? When you're coming out, you're saying you are not like other people, that you've come to terms with it, and other people should too. Then Will has a near panic attack expressing his fear of everyone leaving him. He doesn't even say, I'm gay. The word gay has never been used in this show in a positive way. It's only uttered by bullies. We hear fag and fairy, but we never hear Will take the simple affirmative act of saying he's gay. Instead, he says, I don't like girls. Not even, I like guys. Never a positive affirmation and assertion of who he is. Now, arguably, this reflects Will's state of mind and where he's at this point. But the setup, the supernatural circumstance of his abuser forcing him to come out, didn't have to be written, and the result is this problematic scene. Combine all this with the fact that Will is accepting that he'll never have Mike and declaring it to the group. The overall message here is that Will is a safe gay person who's just like you and will not act on his gay feelings. Who doesn't even say he's gay or likes guys, he just doesn't like girls. The show had replaced the image of Will from Sorcerer of an abused boy courageously fighting for himself to that of someone straight people should understand and feel sorry for. Although Will is fucking courageous to do what he's doing here, it is undercut by his words and the circumstances the Duffers put him in. Where was the homophobia this season? Homophobia was prevalent in Hawkins in season 1 of this show, and it was prevalent in the 1980s. Why not highlight what Will's going up against? Did the Duffers forget? According to the recent Making of documentary, Robin's actress had to remind the creators that her character was not out to Lucas and would be afraid of showing affection to Vicky in front of him. And in this scene, Will doesn't voice what all of us gay people are afraid of when we come out, that the people we're talking to will be homophobic. Instead, he says he's worried that they would worry for him and that he would push them away. Huh? They took out the homophobia. They took out the reality of what Will was fighting against. They downplayed that he's a fighter. Instead of having Will assert who he is, the Duffers play up that he's a victim who deserves straight people's sympathy. Am I not normal just like you? And see how sad I feel? Followed by everyone's trite, and me, and me, and me. According to the Duffer Brothers, who I imagine would call themselves liberals, What the world needs now is not more Wills fighting for themselves, but more straight people accepting Wills. And don't the Duffer Brothers themselves deserve a pat on the back for loving queer people? When the overall tenor of the scene is patronizing and condescending, scoring diversity points indeed. Noah's acting was excellent, but this was a liberal guy's watered-down idea of what an appropriate coming-out portrayal should be. A safe gay person, non-threatening, who everyone should love. And need I mention the fact that Will, in the epilogue, doesn't even kiss his epilogue date? Boys kissing as opposed to girls kissing has always been seen as more offensive to homophobes. This scene was trying to kowtow to the conservative crowd, and both sides hated it. Despite the Duffer Brothers' efforts, this episode got review bombed by the homophobes anyway. This is partially due to writing problems. It wasn't clear to many viewers why Will held up everybody in order to come out. Much of the audience thought he had already had his self-acceptance breakthrough. It didn't help that the show never showed the audience what Vecna showed Will. And it also didn't help that Will's coming out had no payoff. Vecna in the finale never tried to exploit Will's weaknesses or even search for them. But the reason the coming out scene was vulnerable to a homophobic backlash was that it was fundamentally an inauthentic, watered-down, not inspiring portrayal of a coming out. Contrast this to the audience's response to a bolder assertion of Will's gay identity in Sorcerer, which is one of the highest rated episodes in the series, which doesn't surprise me at all. People don't accept queer people because we plead that we are just like them. It's when we fight and force people to accept us. But not only that, by fighting for ourselves and fighting for our right to love, they see in us their own struggles in their own lives. By fighting for ourselves, we inspire others to do the same. It's why the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, led by Black people who were a minority in the nation, forced change and won the support of the majority of young people who then went on to build other social movements in the 1960s and 70s. With the Sorcerer episode, there was a widespread chorus of yes.
Him loving himself, isn't it?
Oh my god, yes, he's not a fucking victim anymore.
Let's go! Let's go!
Holy shit!
Will is doing that! Come on, Will, you tapped in! Fuck these niggas up!
Taste the rainbow, nigga!
Lift these niggas and crickety crack them bones!
Oh shit! Oh yeah!
Vecna special!
You said I was weak! What you talking about? That's dope, cause he killed.
Finally, the boy who had been abused his whole life for being gay and tormented by the Upside Down throughout the show, who Vecna and everyone thought was weak, is not taking this shit anymore. People relate to the underdog who stands up for himself. As a result, the chorus of people cheering him on drowned out the homophobes, if any of them spoke up at all. And just to speculate, I think the final episodes, despite their manifold problems, would have been received better if the show had featured a real showdown between Vecna and Will that many were craving for, where Will opened up a can of gay vengeance on his spindly ass. We've always made progress as a community when we stand up proudly as who we are. The modern LGBT movement started with a riot. The poor reception to the coming out scene shows that when we present ourselves as lambs, we tend to attract wolves. It shows the folly of sanding off the rough edges and sanitizing our experience, of not showing the real courageous people we are. The next thing I'll cover is Mike's homophobic avoidance of Will. In season 4, Will said, "Sometimes I think it's just scary to open up like that, to say how you really feel, especially to people you care about the most, because what if they don't like the truth?" Though he was giving advice to Mike about Elle, it's clear that he's also talking about his own fear of telling Mike he loves him. That's a common fear that gay people have when you're in love with a good friend, that if you were to confess your feelings and they're not returned, that you'll lose your friendship, or at least your friendship will be altered forever for the worse. A positive message that the Duffers could have sent would have been to show that even if Will's feelings for Mike are not returned back, they could still find a way to remain close platonic friends. The show could have portrayed how they could have, by being honest and by setting boundaries, have maintained a close, affectionate friendship. And this is where we'll have a brief story time. Someone wrote to me on Tumblr the following message. From a young woman who's bisexual, she wrote, "I knew I was bi since I was 13, and I crushed hard on a friend. She slowly pulled away as we grew older, and that was tremendously hard. Around that same year, I met my now best friend. I slowly developed a deep love for her over many years, and I finally had the guts to tell her how I truly felt about her about 3 years ago. She let me down gently, and while it was a very hard couple of weeks, we worked it out, and while we are not girlfriends in the romantic sense, she has remained my best friend and has helped support me in our now platonic relationship. I even live with her as her roommate, and she's been such a rock for me. She's accepted me and loved me, and I can't imagine my life without her. She genuinely wants me to find real love and to be happy, and I'm so grateful for her. Now I'm on my own journey of finding my forever partner. I don't know when or how that will happen, but I'm not giving up. Byler gave me hope. It still gives me hope." She writes this after the finale, by the way. "And knowing there are people out there who genuinely understand and want us all to succeed like yourself has been so amazing." So anyway, I want to thank you for that message. But yes, this shows that platonic love is possible among friends where one is gay for the other and it's not returned. And this show portraying a relationship like this would have been so affirming to queer people and reinforce the message that we should not be so goddamn scared. A message that if the Duffers wanted to have an empowering moving on arc, they did not give. One might try to argue that Mike calling them best friends accomplished this. But not only was that line of dialogue a final act of queerbait, it was also cheap. And as I go over, their best friendship from past seasons is gone. Remember that Noah demanded more closure from the Duffer brothers, and they denied it. But they did give that opportunity to Steve, a straight character. They portrayed how he could maintain a platonic, close friendship with a girl who had feelings for that weren't requited. And this show portrays platonic love between guy friends with Dustin and Steve this season far more than it does with Mike and Will, who were the OG best friends of this show. Not only did they criminally drag things out so that there was no time to have this development, they also had Mike being low-key homophobic to Will if you look closely. He's uncharacteristically avoiding physical contact with Will at the end of the season when he had no problem doing so before. On the one hand, you could say that the Duffers did this out of fear that any closeness between Mike and Will, given their history and their chemistry, would have cast a shadow on the reveal that Mike only had romantic feelings for Elle in the finale. Remember, the Duffers' original plan was to have these two not interact at all after the coming out scene, while doing a lot to develop Steve and Jonathan's platonic friendship in the finale. The Duffers also could have been trying to kowtow to homophobes who wouldn't want to see Mike touching Will after knowing he was gay. Whatever their intentions, Mike's avoidance reflects a common form of homophobia, where if you're a gay guy, guys you know avoid physical contact with you for various reasons, including the fear that they'll be accused of being gay and fear of their own possible gay feelings. And also in the 1980s, there was the literal fear with the AIDS crisis that touching a gay person could give you AIDS. This was a famous moment when Princess Diana shook the hands of an AIDS patient that defied this stigma. The Duffers, in wanting to erase the gay from Mike, portrayed a common homophobic reaction to gay people, confirming Will's fears. His fear that while Mike in formal terms might still say they're best friends, Mike is not relating to him the same way he did before. Mike had no problem touching or being close to Will at the start of this season, just as he didn't have that problem during most of the previous seasons. In episode 1, when Will got dizzy in the forest, Mike was the person farthest away from Will, but runs up and is the first person to reach him and puts his hand on him. In the field scene, when he's talking to Will about being a sorcerer, he is flirtily enthusiastic about the possibility. When Will gains powers and saves Mike's life, Mike runs up and hugs him. Now on to Will's coming out. Look at the order of the people who say "and me" and walk up to hug him.
And you'll never lose me. Or me. Or me. Or me.
Or me.
First of all, why wasn't Joyce part of this hug? There's so many issues I have with this scene. But also, Mike is the last person of the core four to join the hug. And we know that's not Mike. He absolutely would be the first person, right after Jonathan maybe, rushing in to hug Will and saying, "and me." But that's not what happens, and this is inconsistent with Mike the leader, Mike who's Will's best friend. And when you see the group shot, you see why. Dustin and Lucas directly hug Will, but Mike does not because Dustin and Lucas are in front of him. They made sure that Mike didn't touch Will. Then later in the tower scene, yes, Mike says that they'll be best friends with some corny enthusiasm, but Mike doesn't hug him? Wasn't this cheap? These two have a history. Did this not fail to recall their closeness from past seasons? Isn't that what you do in a finale? You call back to what came before? Weren't we all robbed of a hug like Will's hug with Jonathan from season 4? That was the kind of hug Mike and Will deserved. But it would have been too gay. So Duffers, are you kidding me? You're not having Mike touch his best friend since kindergarten, who saved his life? Confirming gay people's fear that if you confess your feelings, that will forever change how you relate to each other? Mike, did your lobotomy happen off screen? We literally went from Mike the Brave to Mike No Homo. And the show supports the homophobic narrative that if a gay person confesses their feelings to a straight friend, and this ruins their friendship, then it's the gay person's fault. When no, actually, it's the other person and their homophobic fear that is to blame. Will asks Mike,
"And you still think we can be friends?"
It's framed, especially with the tone of the coming out scene, as if Will would be to blame if their friendship ended. As if being gay and having a crush on Mike were things that he should be ashamed of and apologetic about. Next, the show practices a double standard and subordinates gay love. If Will were a girl, his love for Mike wouldn't have been treated so casually and with such contempt. In straight stories, lifelong love nurtured in the course of a close friendship that began in childhood is treated with respect. It's standard in straight stories for childhood friends to become lovers, so much so that it's a trope. It happens in the 80s movie Some Kind of Wonderful, and I hear it happens in the show The Summer I Turned Pretty. For straight people, it's a trope, but for queer people, no. Instead, we get a patronizing message from the Duffer Brothers of accepting ourselves. There's this excellent post by I Miss Clouds on Tumblr, quoting Ross Duffer telling the LA Times, quote, "The answer to that is them finding strength within themselves as opposed to finding strength with someone else. When we were talking about Will, those are the conversations that we have." But in their own show, Max says to Lucas, "It turns out the whole time I didn't need music."
I didn't even need it. I just needed you.
Why is it that straight people are taught to expect to find love, and us gay people are preached to and told we should love ourselves and be happy with that? Yes, it's common in straight stories for the protagonists to learn to love themselves, but it's usually not counterposed to finding romance. In fact, it's usually a stepping stone to a romantic happy ending. This itself is a trope called Be Yourself, where there is the message that you can be worthy of love and acceptance without sacrificing the things that make you who you are, and to value your unique traits rather than hide them to fit in. It's the trope of stop trying to be someone else. Be true to yourself and love yourself, and the right boy or girl will find you. There's the awkward girl who really likes the popular boy who tries to be a fake popular version of herself when it's revealed that he actually preferred the unique, quirky girl she already was. I haven't consumed much media, but I know the movie Legally Blonde, where the main character, Elle, is dumped by her boyfriend who sees her as just a dumb blonde who goes to law school. And she herself goes to law school and is focused on trying to be the person she thinks he wants. She comes to realize that he wasn't worth it, she didn't need to prove anything to him, and what was important is what she proved to herself. She could remain her fashionable, conventionally feminine, not conforming to law school self. And what happens in the end? She ends up with a nice guy who believed in her all along. There are countless examples in straight fiction where accepting yourself is part of finding love. Meanwhile, we queer people have perhaps the most compelling and heroic "you need to love yourself before you can find love" story of all. But no, for queer people, we're supposed to be happy when we find love from ourselves. In an interview, the Duffer Brothers explained to Entertainment Weekly why Robin and Vicky are not seen together in the epilogue. The author writes, "Show creators Matt and Ross Duffer tell Entertainment Weekly that they, quote, did talk about where Vicky ended up, but it's ultimately up to the audience to decide whether she and Robin are still together." Matt notes, however, that it's not likely the couple's high school romance survived beyond Hawkins. Quote, "From my point of view and from everyone I knew in high school, what percentage of couples remain together after they leave for college? Extremely low," he says. "Max and Lucas survive because their love is that deep, but very few others do. But," Matt adds, "you never know." Wait, what? So Robin and Vicky's love wasn't that deep? Just as he thought Will's love for Mike was just a crush? Why do you automatically assume that queer love in your show, including Will's lifelong love for Mike, is not that deep, Duffer Brothers? Meanwhile, the canon endgame ships, Max and Lucas, Hopper and Joyce, started when they were in middle school or high school. And also, think of the fact that for Lucas and Max and Mike and Elle, they were each other's first boyfriend or girlfriend, which statistically is usually not that deep. And here I gotta play an old clip. Argument number 9. Byler is unrealistic and Will should learn to move on. The argument goes, it would be great for Will to declare his love for Mike and not have it returned because that would be realistic and represent what it was like to be gay in the 1980s. To which I'd say, we already had that storyline, shut the fuck up. But why is it only when it comes to gay romance that we start talking about realism in Stranger Things? Well, I've got to say, I grew up gay in the 1980s, and I've got to tell you, it was really hard to walk to school with all the Demogorgons running around back then. And I'm so grateful that Stranger Things has a realistic depiction of what it was like to grow up in the 1980s. This show has alternate dimensions and telekinetic powers. There's a secret Russian base under Hawkins. Why do the Duffers cry realism now when Hopper and Nancy kill multiple American soldiers and it never comes up again? You cry realism for Robin and Vicky and for Mike and Will when it's clear that Mike is your self-insert and his relationship with Elle is a hetero male fantasy? A nerdy boy who can't get girls, but somehow finds a superpowered girlfriend who for some reason says that he's the only person who sees her and understands her after he had gaslit her and, in Elle's own words, saw her as a monster too? Who then uses her superpowers to die for him not once, but twice? Because of your brand of realism, Duffers, queer romances don't occur, and if they do, they're fleeting and not that deep. Why pull the realism card when it only comes to queer romance, Duffers? We all, as people, seek out fictional stories because we're looking for not only escape, but also ways to deal with struggles in our own lives. And that includes stories with heroes and happy endings. It's what we come to expect from most fiction, and it's why movies like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings are so successful. I've said it before, and I'll sound like a broken record, but I don't care. Straight people expect happy romantic endings all the time. In this show, Joyce travels across the world to the Soviet Union to rescue her man. They have a double Russian prison jailbreak fantasy that overcomes overwhelming odds and near-death situations. They get their impossible reunions, their close calls, their kisses as the music swells, their storybook happy endings. Straight people dominate in real life and even in our fictional stories. Meanwhile, if you want to talk slow burn romances, queer people have many more instances in real life where people don't realize they love each other due to social stigma, self-denial, and fear. Ours are actually the more realistic slow burn romance stories. Citing realism to deny us the same story straight people get is a homophobic excuse, and we deserve happy endings too. So, I believe I made my case. The Duffer Brothers were homophobic in how they queerbaited us, how they treated Noah Schnapp, how they promoted a conservative, condescending message to queer people, and how they subordinated gay love. And their actions have prompted a wave of homophobia that their actions since the finale have only encouraged. Queer representation is not enough. The point of representation is to inspire us to be ourselves and fight for ourselves. Yes, we were given an amazing arc in Volume 1, but then they humiliated Will for his beautiful, deep, authentic love for Mike. They denigrated it, and they built hope in a relationship between Mike and Will that they cruelly and without narrative justification yanked away. This representation has resulted in many of us reliving our traumas and being exposed to homophobic bullying because of the Duffers' actions. At minimum, the Duffer Brothers need to do the simple act of condemning the homophobic bullying that's going on. Say that people should be allowed to cheer for ships that are canon or non-canon, and reaffirm the show's message of supporting the outcast and the marginalized. They need to stop prioritizing their ego, wealth, and careers and do this bare minimum, given the dangerous political times we're in. Meanwhile, to the extent that we Bylers are attacked for loving and pointing out this ship, we have nothing to be ashamed of. We were set up for unfair attack because we respected the Duffer Brothers as writers. Now, if it's any consolation, the Duffer Brothers' decision not to have Byler, and not to act on their claim that they stand for nonconformity and with the outcasts, has ended up making them look terrible. Conformity Gate, the theory that Byler started that the finale was a Vecna-induced hallucination where the characters live conventional lives and that there was a secret 9th episode, became viral and was taken up by the mainstream. It exposed the many plot holes and inconsistencies in the season and the fact that the show betrayed its stated mission. And it showed that many fans were more creative and competent than the Duffers were. Add to that the fact that the making of Season 5 documentary exposed that they started shooting the finale episode before they had finished its script, and a lot of embarrassing moments showing that they had less regard than people under them on many important questions. It's all quite embarrassing for the Duffer Brothers. If Byler had happened, then it would have been the crowning achievement of an otherwise inconsistent season. It would have been the thing everyone was talking about. It would have continued the upward trajectory of Will's arc after Volume 1. It would have redeemed Mike's character, and it would have impressed the mainstream by out-sixth-sensing the Sixth Sense, with a well-developed, in-plain-sight plot twist that they'd have set up over years. The homophobes would have been loud, but they would have been isolated. The Duffers would have only had to do a single interview where they'd explain how they set up Byler over 5 seasons. And the strength of Mike and Will's bond would have been too compelling. Heated Rivalry, a show that's not at all shy about queer themes, has an enthusiastic mass audience, including many straight guys, not only for its erotic content, but also because it has a sensitively portrayed, authentic, and compelling queer love story at its heart. There's a wide audience out there because of the heroism that's inherent in many queer love stories. The betrayal of Byler was our loss, yes, but it was a loss for the Duffers too. Before I end with a treat, last word to the many, I think dozens of young people who have written to me grieving the fact that Byler was not canon. Many of whom had not yet found other people like themselves and had hoped that Byler would happen to give them the courage to come out. I want to say that our community will survive and thrive. We are strong, we are fierce, we are sorcerers. As I said in my last video, our community has dealt with great challenges before, including the AIDS crisis. Even without TV shows with queer representation, we found ways to come out. We found support among our friends and in our families, and if not in our families, we moved away and found families. We found friends, we found lovers. And that's what's actually far more important, finding your network of friends and loved ones for your coming out journey. The Duffer Brothers might have tried to throw Will and us in the trash, but our community has withstood foes far more formidable than 2 writers who have far higher opinions of themselves than they deserve. We didn't need a TV show to riot at Stonewall, and we don't need Netflix to greenlight stories to live out our stories. Before I get to the treat, like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also check out my Patreon for early access to many videos and exclusive content. Alright then, A lot of the homophobic bullying that's being directed at us right now tries to paint us as delusional for thinking that someone who dates the opposite sex might be queer. Certainly, there hasn't been much representation of that specifically in television. But I kind of just went over this. What's represented in TV shows and what homophobes spout online, that's not reality. Many of those cowards don't have the nerve to say those things to our faces, particularly in public, and for good reason. The real stories of our communities is what's actually true and is what's powerful. Now, I'm going to share this video by Threat Level Mom Night on TikTok where she shares a personal story, and I'm going to let the video speak for itself.
Now, what my friend wanted me to come out and say, because the biggest argument for not being on Team Byler is that, well, Mike has L. Mike's dating a girl. So I'm going to share a personal story. I am a straight woman, and in my time of dating, I was dating a man for 3 years. We were intimate. We were talking about a future. We had a whole life. And then one day I came over his house. We had plans to watch a movie. We were going to get Chinese food and watch a movie. I walk into the house. He's crying on the couch, and he chose that moment to come out to me. I was the first person he came out to, and I was in love with him. And I told him I needed some time. And I went home, and being the crazy analytic nutbag that I am, sat there for 3 days, barely sleeping, barely eating, going back in my mind and thinking about everything, like everything we did over and over again. And I started pulling out pictures and all the stuff that we'd done. And it became clear. I saw it. But I didn't see it before. And the worst part is I saw that it was obvious that he was in love with my best friend, who was another straight male. So I went back to his house a few days later, and I talked to him about it. And I gently, the best way I could, asked him if he was in love with my best friend, and he told me yes. And at that time, I said, don't say anything. I mean, my best friend was a, very blue-collar type of guy. Like, he worked in a very hands-on field, not a typical field that you would think of when you think of a gay man. And I said, you probably shouldn't say anything, let's not talk to him about it. Sure enough, 2 years later, my best friend came out too. And they dated. It happens, guys. It happens. And I mean, granted, I was the L in this scenario, right? I was the L. But it happens. And you know what? I supported it. Why? Because I loved them both. And all I wanted for them was to be happy. And that is exactly why I support Byler. If you don't believe me, and you don't believe that Byler is real, go back and watch Stranger Things, and in your mind, make Will a girl. Make him a girl. And you'll see it. You'll see everything that we're seeing. Because trust me, I've been there. I've been where you are. You don't see it because it's not obvious to you. And you're like, oh, well, why would my boyfriend, who I've been with for years, talked about having a future with, why would he be gay? He was. It happens. Don't close your mind off to something just because the obvious is like you're just looking at what's there. Look at everything, not just what's being placed in front of you as the obvious. I hope this helps. I hope this explains things to people. That's just my take on
it. Okay. I'll have a link to this creator's video. You should definitely leave comments on her video if you want to respond to and communicate with her. So yes, there are many Mikes and Wills out there. And although Byler isn't canon in Stranger Things, it's canon for these two men. Byler is real. And just as there was nothing wrong with Will loving Mike, there's nothing wrong in seeing and loving Byler. because queer people and queer love exists, and we were never delusional. Not only because Byler was prepared, but also because expecting queer characters and queer love to be treated with the same regard and respect is merely asking media to catch up to the real world. And it's part of our demanding a better world. Loving Byler is not just not wrong, it's righteous.